Welcome to Budget RC or iRace's Garage, whatever the hell I'm calling the channel when you're watching this. As you can see, today we're going to be talking about RC versions of the General Lee. If you're anywhere near my age, then the chances are you grew up watching this show. Maybe you were a little bit obsessed with this show like I was. And it might have even been your first introduction to muscle cars and high performance or fun cars in general. I know all of those things were true for me. And I've always wanted my own 69 Charger. And of course it would have to be orange. And the closest I'm going to get is an RC version. The problem is for the longest time, I couldn't find anything that I felt was close enough for me to want to take the plunge. And I finally decided to take the plunge, and like I usually do, I overdid it. Now I've got 4, and they're all going to become General Lees. Since there's not a lot of information out there about what it takes to build some of these cars up to be a General Lee or a nice looking 69 Charger in general, I wanted to take you through each one of the 4 options that I found and kind of take you through each one of them, show the pros and cons, and do a comparison between them so that if this is something you're interested in, you can go into your project well informed and buy the one that makes the most sense to you. So as you can see, we've got 4 options here. Starting on my right, which is going to be your left, is the RJ Speed body. I think this used to be called the Bowlink body. This is probably the body that you see the most often. It's been out a long time. And in pictures online, it looks pretty bad. But I wanted to see what it was really like, and so I went ahead and got it. The next option is definitely the newcomer to the scene, and really the one that captured my interest because it just looks so damn close already. And that's the Kyosho Fazer Mark II 70 Dodge Charger. Next one here is one that I don't think too many people are familiar with. It's not real well known, but this is a reproduction body of an older touring car body. And this is made by a small company in Canada named Team Blue Groove. If you're into vintage RCs, RC10s, the old Losies, some of the real old Tamiyas, or the old pan cars and touring cars, then chances are you probably already know of Team Blue Groove. But if you're into the more mainstream, more modern cars, you probably don't. And this is their 69 Charger body that they offer. So I'm going to go through that one as well. And then over here on the end, this is the one that I think you've probably seen the most on YouTube if you've looked at RC General Lee videos in the past, at least until this car came along. This is called the Malibu International body. And this was a toy grade RC that was offered back in 2005, and it was available in Walmart, and it didn't sell for very long. I missed my chance when they first came out, and I kicked myself for it because these things were getting sold for 35 bucks a piece. Now if you find one new in the box, you're going to pay at least 10 times that for this car. And even in used condition, which this one obviously is, they go for what I think is a lot more money than they're worth. And they're fairly hard to find unless you want to overpay for them. But these, for the most part, seem to be the ones that some of the more realistic or some of the most realistic General Lee RC cars are made from. So there's a lot of pros to this one. There's a good number of cons, as there are with all of these. So now what I want to do is go through and give you some information pertaining to what most, if not all of these, would need in order to be converted into a General Lee. Obviously, starting off immediately with the color. And for the most part, it seems like, at least for Lexan paint, the Duratrax Competition Orange spray paint is what most folks are using, and it seems to be about the best option out there. I've got some of it on the way. It's what I'll be using to paint these bodies with, and I may even paint this body with it. And from what I've found out, it looks pretty much the same as the color Kyosho has. And I think it's going to be a really good option. So another thing that you're going to need are the right wheels. And there's a couple options for the Vector wheels, but none of them is really what I would consider ideal. There is a person who's selling his version of a reproduction Vector wheel, and I don't have a set yet. I do plan on perhaps getting a set. They look really good. The only real drawback is that they're pretty expensive. I think by the time you pay for shipping from overseas, they're like 60 bucks a set, so they're not real cheap. Another option is to go with the older HPI style wheel. They were close, but they had the wrong number of spokes, and they're discontinued. So when you find them, they're a little bit expensive. The last option that I'm aware of, and the one I went with, was to use 3D printed wheels. Of course, you know me, I like to do 3D printing. I do a lot of it. These wheels are available right on Thingiverse. You can download it for free, and they look pretty good. My only real complaint with these wheels is that you can see the print lines, but I'm going to try printing with a little bit higher resolution and see how close I can get it. The nice thing about these wheels is that they're available in a couple of different offsets. So if you need to have an adjustment for it to better fit the body you're using with the chassis you're using, you have those options. And that's a really, really nice option to have. And I'll show you why in a few minutes. Now, in addition to the wheels, obviously you need tires. This is another area where it can get a little bit difficult. The tire that most people seem to prefer are the Protoform tires. And that's what I have right here. These are the Protoform tires. These are the vintage Trans Am series tire that they offer. The problem with these tires is they've discontinued the tire on its own. The only way you can get the tire is mounted to the vintage style wheel that comes right from Proline/Protoform. And so you're going to have to pay more money because of that, and you've got to go through the effort of getting the tire off of the wheel. So that's kind of a hassle. Another option, which from what I understand was a good option, was the HPI Trans Am series tire. Those are supposed to be quite a bit stickier than these Protoforms, which to be honest doesn't mean much. These Protoforms are kind of a hard rubber. But the HPIs were supposed to be a little bit softer, offer more grip. But just like the Vector wheels from HPI, they're discontinued. So you've got to try to find them used or new old stock, which will cost you a fortune. The last option that I'm aware of is the stock Kyosho tire that comes on this car. You can see I've got two of those wheels and tires mounted right here. These are a nice sticky tire. The only couple of drawbacks with these tires is that one, they're only available in a 26 millimeter width, not the 26 and 31 millimeter width that the Protoforms are available in. And the other drawback, from what I understand, is that they wear out really quickly. And in feeling them, I'm not surprised, because compared to the Protoforms, they're a lot softer and they feel a lot stickier. So I think they're going to offer a lot better grip, but that's going to obviously be at the expense of the wear. So tires are a little bit of an issue, but that's kind of a benefit if you end up going with the Kyosho, is that you already get the right tire. Granted, you are going to have to go through the same process I mentioned with the Protoforms to get them off of these wheels. But at least the Kyosho tires are available on their own, and they're not discontinued. So that's a huge plus. The other common denominator that I really came across with these cars, and the main reason that I waited so long to buy one of these Kyoshos, is the front end. The front end on basically most, if not all, of these four options, I don't think is really up to snuff. Not if you really want something to be really accurate. Starting with this guy here, you can see that the front end is very flat. It doesn't really offer any depth. And that's really my biggest complaint with this body, and why I never bought one until now. It looked terrible in the painted up pictures I saw online with that slab of a front end. And I never liked it. And the back side of it is pretty much the same story. Moving on to the Kyosho, this front end actually looks really good for a 70 Charger. It's not the same on a 69 Charger. Now there are some things you can do to help with that, and depending on how far you want to take it, you can get various degrees of result. And for the most part, what I've seen online is a lot of guys will either just leave it like it is and be happy with it. Some guys will paint part of the chrome orange to give the illusion of having the fender and hood extension up to the front end and put the little middle piece in. And I found one guy who completely removed it and built a whole new front grille assembly from styrene. And when I saw him do that, that was when I realized that I could get a result out of this that I was going to be happy with. And that's kind of what kicked off this whole project. Now, moving on to the Team Blue Groove, I don't really have too much to complain about with this one. This one, I think of all the three Lexan body options, right out of the box, I think this is by far the best. You can see that there's depth to that, and it very closely mimics the real shape. The only real drawbacks here are that there's still not a whole lot of detail in the front end, even though you do have the depth. The area under the front bumper doesn't really curl underneath the way it should, and the front bumper itself doesn't protrude and stick out like it should. And so those are some things that if you really want to get very detailed, might require some attention. Now we go on to the Malibu body, which, like I mentioned, seems to be the one that most people who really want the most accurate type of RC General Lee gravitate toward. And I'll be honest, in its stock form, this one does look the best of the four. However, it's still not perfect. When you look at the close-up, you can see that the grille isn't wide enough. It doesn't extend all the way out to the fenders, and there's that big flat filler panel on each side that just flat looks wrong. I don't like it. The other problem is that the whole thing is chrome, and the area underneath the front bumper should be orange. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do about that yet. Every one of these I've seen uses the piece as it is. A lot of the guys will paint the orange where it belongs, and that alone makes a huge difference. But it doesn't eliminate the real wide side pieces that don't belong. So I may or may not live with it. I don't know yet. Moving on to the back, it's a lot of the same story here. Starting with the RJ Speed, you have a very flat, two-dimensional rear end. It doesn't have the proper depth and the correct look that it oughta. Moving on to the Kyosho, it's a big improvement. It's got the nice chrome bumper, it's got the inset lights, it's even got the chrome trim around them. The only issue here is that that chrome trim extends all the way across the car, where with a 69, it's not supposed to. The trim goes around the taillights only. I think that's pretty minor, and that should be a really easy fix. Moving on to the Team Blue Groove body, this one doesn't really have the depth and the detail as the Kyosho, but it's way better than the RJ Speed. I think this is, again, it's an acceptable option. If you want the ultimate in scale accurate reproduction, this may not be it for you, but for a Lexan body without the extra front and rear add-on pieces like the Kyosho has, it's pretty good. And then finally, moving on to the Malibu body, not surprisingly, being a hard body with its own bumpers, it looks pretty good. One more thing that I wanted to mention was that this was a car that, if you're familiar with the show, always had the windows down, and you always had a view of the driver. Even during the jumps, you could see the stunt driver with the helmet and the whole 9 yards. So this is one of those builds that if you really want any kind of accuracy, you're going to have to come up with an interior option. And that's another area that I'm still working on, and I'm not sure yet just how detailed I'm going to get with each one of these. With at least one of these, I want the interior to really be as good as I can get it. For the other ones, I want to have something, just because you need to have a driver there. The windows are going to be down. One of the options that I'm looking at are these really inexpensive Lexan interiors that are made for the SCX-10 and the TRX-4 and those sorts of bodies. This interior is nowhere close to the interior of a 69 Charger, but I think by the time you make it tan, you put a driver figure in here and you make sure that the car is moving at all times, it's probably going to be pretty close. I think it'll certainly be good enough for a car you want to bash on. If this is going to be sort of a shelf queen, then something else might be a better option. I'm not a styrene guy, but I've seen some guys, especially with this style car, make some really nice, detailed, accurate looking interiors from styrene. If I can do it, I'm going to try to come up with something in 3D CAD that I can 3D print. If I can't, then go with this guy. This is one that I also kind of already have dog-eared for Roscoe's car. So if I do decide to go with this option in any of these, I'm going to have to get some more. But I think it might be a pretty good option. It seems like it's a pretty decent fit, and this has got enough room in the sides that it should be adaptable to any of these widths. It's wide enough that it fits just like it is into the RJ Speed body pretty well. And with some trimming, it will also fit into the narrower Team Blue Groove body. And this body here should be about the same width as the Team Blue Groove body, so it should also be a really good option for this too. So, 4 unique options, each with their own pros and cons. And not every one of these is necessarily going to appeal the same way to each potential builder. I think there's a lot to chew on here. I had planned on going through each car in more detail, but this video is already, I think, over 20 minutes, and I really need to wrap this up. If you want to learn more about any of these particular models, I would urge you to consider subscribing to the channel. I'm going to do a build video on each one of these as I transform it into a General Lee. And within each one of those videos, I think I'll be able to provide more specific detail in terms of what's going to go into not only getting the body to look right, but what I need to do with the chassis. Obviously, this one, the chassis is already done for you. But in each of these other 3 options, they're not. And each one of these 3 remaining options is going to pose some challenges of their own with regard to the chassis and getting the body to fit the chassis. And those, I think, will also be considerations for you when trying to choose the best option. So if you enjoyed this, and if you're still here after all of my talking, please consider subscribing. I think you'll also get more out of each one of these individual videos. But until then, thanks for watching, guys. I'll catch up with you soon.